Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Travel Trends and our Rail series. Today, we're going to be speaking to the CEO of Railbookers, Frank Marini. But just to give everyone a bit of context to this three-part series that we were so excited to put together, given that we focused on rail in season 5. We had a two-part series where we brought in Frank Marini from Railbookers, and we also had Bjorn Bender, the CEO of Rail Europe. And our audience was clearly very interested in rail. We did a follow-on episode where I went to Frank's conference last year and had the most extraordinary time meeting the Railbookers team, understanding their culture, and also David Stryker, who was this incredible mentalist that you actually heard on season 7 opener of Travel Trends podcast. Well, that was all inspired by Frank and the team at Railbookers. Frank was also a key part of our AI summit, and they're coming back this year as another partner and a sponsor of that series. And so Frank, for me, is really the gold standard of executive in the travel industry. And I wanted to close out this three-part series with him. You've met a number of team members now over the course of the series. We, of course, started by looking at the most iconic and scenic rail journeys, which I know is a series my mom absolutely loves. She's such a big fan of rail travel and she watches all the programs. So that was actually a big inspiration for us creating that opening episode to highlight all the amazing places you can travel the world in 2026 with Railbookers. And then we did our luxury series. Now, luxury has been an unstoppable force in the travel industry. That market just keeps growing. So I was really excited to bring that episode together, especially after having done the spotlight episode on Virtuoso and seeing the interest in rail. And then today, what I wanted to do is discuss the future of rail from both a technology point of view, distribution, and also how the product is going to continue to evolve. And who better to have that conversation with than Frank Marini, the CEO of Railbooker. So, Frank, welcome back to Travel Trends. Thanks for our partnership and looking forward to regrouping with you today.
No, thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me. Great seeing you again. Great to be back, and thank you again. Really appreciate it.
For sure. I mean, it was such a special honor for me to be a part of your event in Las Vegas. And, many people who've listened to that episode who got to meet the rest of your executive team. It gives you a whole different perspective on an individual. I've gotten to know you over the years from, the Travel Corporation. We have many great friends in common, of our listeners heard, but being able to see you in action and meet the rest of the team and be able to have those behind the scene moments when you're recording gives you a really true sense of what a great company can be and the people that love working with you and being part of the team. And I just wanted to underscore that because I think that in as much as having a great business and a great product, it really does come down to the culture of the team. And one of the things you've also done is really advanced the technology side of this industry with your efforts around AI. So I would love if you wouldn't mind, for those people who are not familiar with Frank Marini, haven't listened to the previous podcast, don't know much about Railbookers, would you guys mind just giving us a brief overview of your background, the business, and the team?
Sure. No, thanks, Dan. So we're Railbookers Group. We're the largest independent FIT rail operator worldwide. We operate Railbookers brand and as well as Amtrak Vacations brand in the U.S. And we've got close to 400 staff located in 7 countries around the world, and we're 100% remote. So that's a little bit about us. I'm president and CEO, as you mentioned, and we've got an amazing group of individuals, our team members. I'm so excited you got to see that at our summit. We're got you some wonderful, wonderful people who are all comedians too. We like to have a good time and have a lot of fun. So it's great. And for us, I would say the biggest thing we all have a passion about is showing people what's possible, what you can do by rail, because most people don't know, and that's kind of our thing. Um, as far as technology, technology in the rail space is complicated. Every rail system on Earth is completely different, whether you have national rail systems, whether it's luxury rail, even scenic rail. They're all different. The technology is different. The rail itself is different. The seating is different. How they operate. We live in that complexity. We like to be in there. That's kind of why we exist. And from a technology standpoint, we've kind of built our own technology, our own RBG rail system, our own AI system, knowledge base system called Fast Track. So we're kind of building that ourselves just because there is no commonality in that space. And So that's kind of why we exist.
That's great. Thank you. And for those people who are multitasking, railbookers.com, as you heard throughout the series, is their main website. They work a lot with trade partners as well as consumers directly, but they put together some absolutely extraordinary packages for people to be able to travel by rail. And one of the things that Frank had highlighted to me in our conversation is just how rapidly this category is growing. I heard that in our very first episode together a little over a year ago. Heard that, of course, about 3 or 4 months ago at your global conference. And as Frank and I were kicking off this recording, business continues to be strong through 2026, which is wonderfully encouraging. But there's something that's happening here with rail. And so I would love to start there because I am a huge fan of rail, as many of our listeners know. And for me, the idea of taking a rail journey has always had a great appeal. But it is one of those things that I think most people don't even realize that, they don't necessarily see rail as the whole conduit to the journey and the experience that they'll take a train trip, they'll go to Europe and they might take a train. But no, these experiences are completely built around some of the most epic train journeys in the world where you can sometimes stay on the train, but more often than not, stay at beautiful hotels and get off the train and be able to experience local culture and cuisine. And so, but it really starts with the train journeys themselves. So tell us a little bit more about why you think rail is having a moment here in 2026.
Thanks, Dan. I think, for rail having a moment, it's, in a sense, rail has always been there, in the sense that the infrastructure is in place, the trains are in place, pretty much for the most part all over the world. And I think what, at least for us, we've almost created a category ourselves as we're really the only one that, in a sense, does what we do, because you've got the rail companies themselves, the operators who have been there, but then there really isn't necessarily rail tour operators independently that put it all together. And I think more and more, as we've seen, many, many, many people travel by train, but there isn't a lot of good data on that. And the reason why is you could just walk up to a train station, buy a ticket, and get on, and the rail company doesn't know who you are necessarily. So, and we see that rise of independent travel. And I think for us, it's having a moment, and we seem to keep going. I'm so thankful, going from strength to strength in our record growth and continues. Is more people looking for ease, flexibility, and these are some of the things that rail travel provides. It's ease. You can go on any date the rail goes, boarding, walking around the train, having a glass of wine instead of driving, and things look different from the train. You get to see things that you may not see if you're in the sky because clouds all look the same. So I think it's having a moment, and more people are getting onto this. More companies are adding rail. The rail companies are seeing a lot more luxury rail coming out, and that's good for all of us as it's coming in to a category, and it's really having a moment. And I don't see that slowing down. I just think it's finally getting amplified. I almost think it's always been there. It's been the sleeping giant that's always been there that you didn't know about because no one quantified it or no one amplified all of it together versus an individual rail line.
Yeah. And one thing that's really interesting, both from a North American perspective, of course, you're based in California. I'm based in Canada. Many of our listeners know, and Frank knows I lived in California for a number of years. And I spent a lot of time in the American market and half of our listeners in the US. So for me, I very much look at this from a North American perspective. And when I say that is because with a few exceptions, there's not many rail journeys in North America, with the exception, say, of Alaska, or even the Canadian that goes, from Toronto to Vancouver. There's the Rocky Mountaineer. There are a collection of incredible train journeys in the U.S., but really, when we think of rail, we think of Europe. I know Switzerland's the number one destination for rail bookers from that Spotlight episode. I know how important Norway is. But as I then started to have those conversations with your team, Frank, what opened my eyes was just how many countries offer epic rail journeys and how much investment still continues to go into them. And so clearly there is a surge of interest. But before we get into that, I'm actually genuinely curious to know what are some of the misunderstandings about rail travel? I mean, how many people actually do know that you can combine, you can create rail packages, for example, because that's something that really you have innovated. That's a concept that you have really pioneered in many ways. You've created these packages that people can't often get elsewhere, and the way that you put them together and that people come back through rail bookers, travel agents, and consumers. they want to continue booking with rail bookers to have these experiences that you've put together with all of these partners. They can go out and find a train ticket, but they can't build these packages that you create, and that's what's really special. But I imagine that people look at rail bookers and they're trying to understand who you are, what you guys do. So
Mhm.
tell us about some of the misconceptions about rail travel first.
Yeah, sure. So some of the misconceptions are is really in a sense just awareness that you can even do something by train. You know how so everything. Oh, is there? Does a train go there? Is there a train in that country? Can you get between those
Yeah,
cities or those countries or visit
yeah,
those national parks? So that's the biggest misconception is no conception at all. So it's really almost an educational. That the amount of times I'll get asked like, you can do that by train? Like, there's a train that goes there? So that's the first one.
right.
I think the second thing is, you because it's maybe not as familiar, maybe someone understands a train from maybe commuting when they were younger, or maybe they backpack, but that there's so many different levels of experiences on the trains itself. Again, whether it's a national train system, a luxury train, a scenic train, and they're all different and have something to offer. So that it really helps, especially when you because we're in the vacation business, we're not in the commuter business. So it's all about vacation, what you're gonna go, see, do, how close in proximity sometimes things are, or how iconic something can be, from a journey itself. So those are the things, whether it's a consumer or a travel agent, we're always trying to put out there and educate, with different itineraries and new itineraries that the number one thing we get all the time is, "Really? You can do that by train? Like, I had no idea. That sounds amazing." So that's probably our biggest thing, misconception. It's no
Yeah, well,
conception.
well, it's interesting when you mentioned that. First of all, can you get there by train? And the answer in many countries is more often than not yes, especially in Europe. And it's actually then quickly becomes actually it's faster, it's cheaper, it's a preferred way to travel because I mean for me obviously I love the experience of traveling by rail and did the whole Eurail and the backpacking thing. But when I look at the opportunities to actually travel on train cars that have been customized for exactly this experience, one of when we talked about luxury, and highlighted some of the luxurious cabins that have now been created. I think most people they're familiar with cruise lines, they're maybe even familiar with river cruises, but they're not necessarily fully aware that you said it really well, is that there's commuter trains, and it's actually that's not often what we're talking about here. I mean, there's high-speed trains that you can travel on, but really the opportunity is to travel on custom-built, purpose-built, cabins and trains to be able to match the moment of the type of travel to maximize the scenery and travel at the right pace, and it's like this is, as you said, a train designed for a holiday.
That's right, and with them all being different, it's really all about, what the customer or the travel agent's experience that they are looking to have, because in many cases, like we're talking about, you can overnight on the train if it is that type of luxury train or an overnight train, or in a sense, you're getting off and we're putting you up in a hotel, 3, 4, 5 star, and your sightseeing you want included. So it's really about the whole experience. But the backbone of it is the rail experience, which actually makes it easier to travel. It's more enjoyable, it's relaxing, and it sets that foundation, whether that's luxury or whether that's going in between different cities or different countries.
Now, in terms of understanding why the business, like what's driving this behavior, I'm keen to talk about the expansion of a lot of the rail networks and some of the new product that's been created by virtue of that and the new lines that have been introduced. But
Mhm.
before we do that, most travel can be cyclical, and so people rush to do
Mhm.
cruising or river cruise, and they kind of move. But what's interesting is it seems as though rail travel has been more permanent in the last couple of years. That the growth that you've seen year over year and then month over month. And what I'm curious as far as what's driving that is it repeat guests that are saying, I'm going to done this rail journey. These are the rail journeys of the world that I want to go on. Is it more people coming into the category? I'm assuming it's probably likely a combination of both. But what do you think now is driving a more permanent change that is just that it's this industry is so robust and there's so much demand and interest for rail journeys?
Yeah, great question. Well, I think a few things. One is it's not a fad industry. It's or there's something that comes in and out. Like let's say like glamping. Remember, glamping came in
Of
and went right
course.
out.
Yeah.
Um, it's something that's always been there, and it's getting more and more attention to it. And I really think it's all the things you mentioned, right? So it's repeat from customers because they can go anywhere in the world that there's rail travel. It's travel agents, and doing an amazing job with us, and all of a sudden them repeating a lot. And in many cases, we're just a piece of someone's overall trip. They could be doing a river cruise in Europe, but they finish in Basel. But instead of hey, I don't want to get a car. I can take a train and go down to St. Moritz for a few days by train, maybe Lake Como. So all of a sudden, it's also a bolt-on to other forms of travel, river cruising, cruise, things like that. So it's a combination of everything, and it is iconic to say, okay, I've done the Canadian Rockies by rail. Maybe now I want to do part of Europe by rail. I want to do across country the national parks in the U.S. by rail. Or you name it, Australia. So you name it. So it kinda has a little bit of something for each category of customers, like, even as an example, which came started a couple years ago, we didn't market to this, we're still getting tons of honeymooners, and we didn't market to honeymooners before, but they want that flexibility, they don't wanna go on a set itinerary, they wanna choose what they wanna do and customize it, and that's just so it's a little bit of everything that it's getting noticed, let me say that.
Yeah. Well, and this is where, when you all of a sudden you have such high demand, you have new experiences that are being created. And this is what we see in other industries where, new destinations are being introduced and new rail cars are being created for the purpose of travel. And so tell us a little bit more about the investment that you've seen in rail networks and where that investment has been primarily focused. Obviously, Europe has been quite significant. But tell us how that's leading to investment in both the rail lines themselves and the experiences they offer.
Yeah. So whether that's investment in, let's say, new lines or new trains in Europe or different areas, or new luxury trains coming out, let's say like La Dolce Vita or the new trains coming out, anytime you see that, it creates excitement, it creates new PR in the marketplace, and all of a sudden highlights rail, which we've seen for years in the cruise business. We continue to see it in the cruise and river cruise business, where it's the new ship that has the new feature on board or the new river cruising. All of a sudden now you see that with the rail lines, and you're seeing more and more of that, both national and luxury across the way, as they not only continue to meet demand, but improve or create new products that didn't exist. So it benefits all of us, just like you'd see in the cruise industry with new ships coming out with new features on them. So that's been pretty exciting to me.
Yeah, it's great. Well, and then that's where, for me, when I see certain journeys, like there's also beauty, and we saw that in the series that we just, over the last 2 episodes. We started with scenic and iconic for a reason because there are certain train rides and destinations that are just truly, unbelievably epic, and they're perfect. Like, the fact that the rail line was created when it was, with the views that it has, and there are so many places around the world that was, the good fortune of history that now it makes for a great rail experience. My trip to Sri Lanka is a great example. I unfortunately had to travel by a van with my family, and all I wanted to do was get on that train and see the world from and every time I see pictures now, I can't wait to get back. Like, it's so there's destinations that are literally to be experienced by virtue of the train. And then the luxury side, that was the part that also really struck me when you look at, the Orient Express as one example, to be able to travel from Paris to Venice. And it was something that was highlighted at the Virtuoso conference, that people who take these trips are not always bragging about them because they're a bit more humble about the fact that they are the social status and how truly opulent they are. And a friend of mine took that trip last year, and his wife posted a couple of pictures, and he said, "Yeah, no, let's hold off on that. Let's just enjoy this for ourselves." And so, but there are more people, like high net worth individuals, that are choosing this style of travel as well, because guess what? At the ski club that they belong to, one guy really wanted to do the Orient Express, and then it was like 4 couples that went and
Right.
had the most incredible time, and they were planning future rail journeys. And so that to me is, what's exciting about this space, as I keep hearing from other people, which further validates for me that there's something special happening here. And but for those people who are listening to this, Frank, or have listened to the last 2 episodes and are still wrapping their head around rail travel versus, obviously a car or air, tell us some of the things from your vantage point, because you and I come from the same school of travel marketing from the Tolman family, and knowing that, you have to sell the difference, and you have to be able to understand what your unique selling proposition is. And that's what we were always, taking a task for in those meetings, to try and really highlight that. But ultimately, it became so valuable when we had to go out to market and present and really explain, why rail, why rail bookers. And so when you're answering the question of why rail, I know for myself, I don't like sitting in traffic. My preference is not the stop and start motion of being in a car or a coach if I can avoid it. I love the continuous movement of a train. Yes, it stops at stations, but by and large, it was moving at a certain pace where I don't end up with a headache when I arrive at the destination. And so any city I arrive in, I take the train in. I was just in Vancouver, take the train into town. Most great cities now have a train option rather than taking taxis. So that to me is one of the things. And but tell us us what stands out to you that why people love rail travel or choose rail travel over alternative forms of transport.
I think the first thing, Dan, is one, the flexibility of it, right? It's, let's say versus a set date on, let's say, an escorted tour, you can go any date on any train. So it creates maximum flexibility when designing your itinerary. I think that's the first thing. Second thing I would say is really your vacation. That's the business we're in, starts the second you get on board. You can choose to read a book, have a meal, have a glass of wine, look at the great sights versus I have to get somewhere. Behind a car, I got to get somewhere. If I'm in the bus, I got to get somewhere. The plane, I'm getting somewhere. You're kind of already there when you got you get on board, and it's almost like a decompression, right? And you can get up and walk around if you want to. You can't talk, you gotta stay in your seat. We got turbulence. You're automatically, in my opinion, in vacation mode and in relaxing mode, whatever that is to you, right? And I think that's what the train provides. And if it's luxury, it's a whole nother level, right? So you can go to the bar car or what have you, you name it, have dining on board. So that's, I think, the essence of what rail travel. It's not. Yes, in some cases, it is your transportation, could be your hotel, it could be your restaurant as well, but you're on vacation when you get on board. Very different from I'm getting to a vacation. I'm trying to get transported to a vacation. You're already on vacation when you get there. So I think
Yeah.
that's the difference.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I mean, one of the things that people highlight about a cruise holiday is the fact that they unpack once and they get to then explore destinations
Mhm,
from there. But the idea you actually have your transport, your route, your itinerary. The one big thing that we've certainly seen is ease of travel. You mentioned that right at the beginning. I think that's one of the things that travelers are looking for today more than ever. Just to know that everything's going to be taken care of, especially 50 plus travelers, which I
mhm,
know
mhm,
is a significant part of the audience for rail bookers and those that book through travel advisors that just want to know that their clients are going to be taken care of from a well-known brand where they're going to ensure the experience is going to be excellent and they're going to come back raving about it. So along those lines, obviously, w- with this category continuing to evolve, the one of the big components of this is technology, and you have been
mhm,
a big advocate for this, and I specifically, I'm going to want to get into the topic of AI.
mhm,
One thing I did want to highlight too is that we actually mentioned Frank is also a successful published author. He wrote a book called Staying on Track, which I have read, and he kindly autographed for me. It came out
mhm,
in 2024, and we've mentioned it on the podcast, and a number of people that have listened to the episode have come up to me and told me that they bought your book. It happened at ITB. You and I saw each other
sure,
in Berlin
yep,
a little while ago, and one of the owners of a company called World Expeditions, based in Slovenia, came up to me and I mentioned I was meeting with you later today. He's like, "Oh, say hi to Frank for me. I read his book. I learned so much from it about
mm,
how you embrace AI." So it was really a combination of culture. It's a great read. So I highly recommend any of the executives in the industry listening to this, order it on Amazon, grab a copy of Staying on Track, and Frank's certainly someone to follow, pay attention to, especially when you're speaking at other conferences. But tell us a little bit about the staying on track, your management, and then I'll get into technology since that is such a big part. But really, it starts with being customer focused.
Oh, no, thanks, Dan. Yeah, it's, the book itself and then the whole focus is 100% customer focus, and everybody talks about that, but we really try to live and breathe it. And what I talk about in the book, and what I mean by that is, like, everything from our own internal org structure. It has me reporting to the customer. That's what we put out to the whole company. But it's really about just paying attention and asking series of questions often and on a regular basis at every part of a customer travel agent's journey with us, and realizing in questions are the answers if you ask the right questions, if you listen enough. And I think that's a big part of our whole business. That's what the book is about, because like I started with, this space has always existed, but in many cases the customer did it all themselves, and it was just by paying attention, or the travel agent may have been doing a little bit, may have struggled with it, but hearing the demand for that, if we're asking all the right questions throughout that journey, it's amazing. Like, our customer is our product developer. They'll tell us what they're looking for and why. Who knows? They could have watched a movie, saw, hey, there's a rerun of Harry Potter, bang, here comes the Jacobite trains go up, or you name it. Or when White Lotus came out years ago in Sicily, boom, our Sicily itineraries went up, and you can take a train train on a ferry, boom,
Mm.
from Italy over to head over to Sicily. So I think for that's kind of what the book is about. We try to instill that with our whole company and in every aspect of what we're doing. We kind of follow a Jeff Bezos's philosophy that in every meeting, every conversation, we think of an empty chair, and that empty chair represents the customer. And if we're not including them in the conversation, we shouldn't be having the conversation.
Yeah. So I love that. It was one of the things Steve Ferrelli, who I know is a big fan of yours, worked at the Travel Corporation, worked at Rocky Mountaineer, Captio. He's, close with both of us. I saw him for dinner just in Vancouver recently, and he was talking about what a huge fan he is of rail bookers and obviously yourself specifically, Frank. And he, it kindly really reconnected us. And one of the things that Steve had said to me was that he wouldn't work for a company that doesn't take that approach. That he did that doesn't believe what you just highlighted, which is, can you have the conversation in front of your customer about how your business generates revenue, profits, margins? To be able to have that type of open conversation is the real trust factor. And so I just wanted to underline what you shared there because, at first glance, but that may seem obvious, but it's actually not in corporate boardrooms. And so you just need to watch the Dynasty series with the Murdoch family to realize they probably don't want your customer at the table. You don't even want your other family members at the table. So I was I was gripped with that four-part series, and I think consumers listening to this or travel agents may say that's obvious, but it's not in the corporate world, and it is special. And it's unique.
No, thanks, pal. I
Yeah.
appreciate it from Steve as well too, because it is important. And honestly, I mean it like we live and breathe it every day. Just to give you an example, last week I was at an offsite with our new website company that will be rebuilding with our marketing team our 12 different websites. During the lunch hour, I brought a speaker and I played calls for an hour so they could hear our travel agents and customers on the phone. And they kind of gathered around to hear the type of questions that customers, travel agents are asking. And I explained to them that not only myself, all of our managers, we listen to calls every day. And that continues on because we need to stay close to the customer, the travel agent, what they're asking, what their needs are, to then how do we better serve our inside team, our customer from a technology standpoint, a knowledge standpoint. And it's a fascinating thing to be. It's funny. It was fascinating to them that anyone did that. It's fascinating to me that no one wouldn't do that, because
Yeah.
you're trying to create something, but I'm not creating it for me. I'm trying to create it for a customer. So I need to understand, which is the whole gist of the book, on a regular basis. What are they asking, and can I deliver that?
Yeah. Well, let's connect that to, your the focus on the customer, need to understand the journey that they go on when deciding who they're going to choose to travel with and making sure your brand remains relevant and how this relates to AI because you went on your own journey there. And I see two sides to this from getting to know you, the team, having read the book is that, from a making sure your business remains relevant, you obviously need to really understand
Hmm.
technology. And
Hmm.
so you went on, but at the same time, you have also made a conscious decision to bring your team along on that journey and to empower the organization to really embrace AI. And that again is something that is more rare than I think people realize. And alive because I've spoken to a lot of people. I was recently at a conference, and I won't highlight the company. I'll just say it was an insurance company, and they were highlighting to me the sales team was so frustrated their marketing team doesn't use AI at all, and they've tried to implement some of these LLM tools, and nothing is working, and they're just really frustrated, and they're questioning the future of their company based on their inability to embrace AI successfully and build it into their culture. And so that is actually more the reality that you still hear out there today. But you were very early in recognizing, what a big shift was coming. Tell everyone, but I know we highlighted this on our direct episode, but I really want to bring that back here because I think anyone listening to your story and understanding Railbookers needs to understand how you went on that journey around AI and continue to upskill yourself and bring it into the culture. So tell everyone about your MIT experience.
Sure, sure. No, so basically, a couple years ago, it was 2004, but it was end of 2003 when ChatGPT came out and hearing about it and trying to grab and read as much as I could while playing around with AI in the early stages, even though it'd been around for a long time. Is I realized I really got to get ahead of this one because I want to understand it. And I looked for the best place I could learn, and MIT had basically leading a company with AI. And I took their first course that they had, which was amazing. It was almost life changing for me with 60 other cohorts from around the world. And I was lucky enough to go to because that's where the best and the brightest are. I mean, these are cutting edge professors and and people, and and really embracing it and getting the foundation of what AI is, what it can do, and where it's going from their vantage point, because many of them had been using it for so many years. Our professor actually at the time, who I've become very friends with, also advises NASA, to give you some idea, right? So I
Mhm.
mean, way more complicated things than what I do. Since then, I've continued to take a series and continue to going back to MIT and a series of courses there to stay relevant. And it's amazing in a year's time frame. It's like going from bowling to skydiving, how similar things are because they're not at all. It's advancing so fast. So for us, so then that continues today, and I continue to do that today. Actually, I'll be there in 2 weeks. I'll be back in 2 weeks. So looking forward to that. Uh, but for and then I also have the cohorts of my classes. We all stay connected through WhatsApp, so we share best practices on what we're learning. So it's like a continuous thing, which I love. For us as an organization, I kind of took that as a foundation, and spread it through the organization. We have AI committees. We've got enterprise licenses, locked in for our team to use to play around with, and then kind of went through each department, and that continues to evolve. How we're using it today, it's not all great because you can see work slop coming out of it, where sometimes it generalizes too much. You got to be careful with guardrails and things, but what it can do in best practices and learning. So that's a big part of it, and that led to our development of our own AI uh, knowledge based system, which is amazing even today, and is also a living, breathing thing. So that's a little bit on our AI journey.
Well, tell us how it changed. So there's a two-part to this that I wanted to get in a bit more detail on. First, about the culture inside the company and embracing AI, specifically around improving technology that you're offering consumers. So giving the team access to these tools, encouraging them to utilize them. Tell us a little bit of how you've integrated AI within Railbookers, and then I'd like to hear a little bit about how you've continued to try and optimize towards AI to make sure that customers can find you and that, like, during their the research process, because there's two great examples there of how you guys are using it. And but yeah, I guess first tell us a bit
Mhm.
more about the technology side, because there's been a lot of complexity to rail travel.
Yeah, yeah. So on how we're handling it ourselves internally is we look at every role in the organization and every department and decide, try to break down each role by tasks. And that changes all the time. Of what task should be a human, what should be a machine. And we try to automate the simple tasks throughout by building AI agents in different areas, or auto QC, or data analytics, you name it. And as we grow and scale, we continue to do that because something that didn't exist yesterday all of a sudden is existing today. So, and that's a living, breathing thing. We're also educating our own team on a weekly basis on how each department may be using AI and what they learned and tried and what worked and what didn't. So it's kind of a self-fulfilling thing. With that, we're also with our own knowledge-based system, that is the more once we launched it last year called Fast Tracks, now the scale of how it's learning, and as an example, and that's a system where our own team can ask it a question every week on rail travel, things that actually don't necessarily exist. You couldn't Google some of this stuff, like where to sit on the train so you see, that one mountain and things. Like you couldn't really find that. So a lot of it comes from our team that's actually traveled to those areas. But what it also created, it creates a team for us. I have a team that actually goes through all the 3,000 questions that get asked every week, what Fast Track gave as an answer to that, making sure it's correct. Also, if it didn't have an answer to something, feeding that back, right? So it's a living, breathing thing. So every day it gets better, smarter, because it's gauged off of what customers and travel agents are asking. What's interesting is we can see, you mentioned Sri Lanka. Well, I can see questions about Sri Lanka coming up specifically out of the UK, and they're asking about the UK to travel there by train and out of Australia. So we also see patterns on trends. It's not just a system. So it's created other roles in the organization. We may not need certain roles. We created other roles we needed, and other knowledge all of a sudden we didn't have before, or vision into what more vision into the customer. So it's been a really amazing thing.
Well, and having had you a part of the AI summit, I definitely encourage our listeners to check out your keynote, because it was one of the most popular, if not the most popular keynote at our event. And you can see that by the views, but also the engagement we had in the moment of people listening to Frank and commenting on it afterwards. Because there are certain things that will apply across the travel industry to understand how Railbookers has embraced AI. But the other thing I'd like to ask you on this topic is that, even that conversation is now is, 3 or 4 months and things are changing so rapidly. You mentioned you're going back and, constantly, even when I'm doing keynotes on these topics, as soon as I have one created, I wanna keep editing it right up until I go on stage because there's continuous exciting developments happening in this space, right? And you look back at something you shared at the conference, you're like, "Wait a second, Claude Cowork wasn't available. There was no OpenClaw." And it's like these things are, and that I'm saying those are going to date this now eventually in 6 or 8 months. And people are like, well, we moved well beyond that. But tell us how you're planning to utilize this technology in 2026 and beyond. And clearly, obviously, it's being built into the culture. So you'll continue to embrace it. And what you just described about looking at every role and looking at business processes is one of the things that I encourage companies to look at when they're championing, figure out a champion, get everyone on board, and work with the right partners. Those are kind of my 3 things to go to that, to get on the journey. But, tell us a little bit what else you have planned or in store for the use of that technology.
Yeah, of course. So there's a couple things. One is searching, right? So we have a lot of, and with rail travel, it can be a little complicated. You can use an LLM to search, yourself as it exists. For us, we're building out. We have a version of it. We're continuing to advance it. Our own internal search because there's so many different combinations of different things and routes. So from a search perspective, an AI search, but that's more geared towards our team customers and travel agents. So that's one. The second is we're going to, I call it, 3 levels down in our data analysis. So we because we FIT or customize everything, we actually have lots and lots of data. We're a very data rich company, and to be able to go down to certain levels to say, hey, if you look at all our data, everything from what was quoted to what's booked by market, where the customers are coming from, travel agencies are coming from, to see at what point they're asking about who that customer is. Is it a honeymooner customer? Where are they going? When did they convert? How long the period of time from quote to booking? And really serving it up automatically, as even a suggestion to the customer and travel agent that, hey, that combination you're asking for converts at a 74% rate this time of the year. With that, I know they're looking for as well. That's a 17% conversion. So I would suggest this over this. That's what my data tells me. So that's another way we're looking at it. And then the last thing is, from a QC perspective, because again, when you customize things and personalize things, it has to be QC'd. It's hand curated. So how can AI go way ahead for us because we do everything from rail, but sure, we do hotels, sightseeing, transfers, ferries, you name it, every single thing. So there's lots of components, and to be able to scan that and then look ahead to see ahead. So those are just a few of the ways, but we're constantly building little AI agents on very particular things in the organization that allow us to go faster, faster and more accurate.
Yeah. Well, I really like that you mentioned AI agents because obviously we're in that, the realm of agentic AI. Many companies and a lot of individuals are still wrapping their head around what does that mean for my role, for my company, and being able to be able to create AI agents that can work on your behalf to be able to accomplish tasks. I wanted to share one, and then I'm keen to get your take on this, Frank. I've got one more question on technology, and then I
Mhm,
actually want
mhm.
to get back to some of the product and experiences. Since ultimately, and I always find there's 2 sides to this. Is there's the back end that excites many of our listeners and people like us that understand what's involved in that. But then it's ultimately it comes back to serving the customer and what's in their best interest. And sometimes we get lost in the technology side and get disconnected from the customer because we can get carried away with what technology can do, but we're not keeping it in lockstep with what the customer expectations are. And so that for me is, I guess, my sanity check when it comes to how we're progressing technology. But I'll give one example that I think might be interesting for our
Mm,
listeners, and obviously Frank knows this. But when you look at how technology is evolving so rapidly in the travel industry, there's been a lot of fragmentation, a lot of issues with connectivity, and one of the beautiful things that AI can do specifically is to be able to build out APIs, application interfaces. And one of the big challenges, from my previous role as a chief digital officer, trying to advanced suppliers working with online travel agencies and other partners, we would always come up against the same issue, which is that their roadmap is, they're 6 months behind in being able to work with partners on APIs. So it's basically get in line based on a priority. And there's instances, as you know too, where they would say, "Oh, we won't write to your API. You have to write to our API." And
Mhm,
so
mhm,
just so everyone's following along, an API literally just stands for application interface, allows two platforms to be able to talk to each other with a bit of a common language. And so, but you still need to decide who's going to talk to who. Are you going to go to our API, or are they going to come to ours? And you try and make your API as flexible as possible. And the beautiful thing now with AI as an intermediary and a coding resource is that you can build these APIs in hours, and you can find partners that will create these APIs that allows you to better connect. And from a consumer point of view, what does that mean? It means much more connectivity across everything you've booked. From a consumer point of view, everything's just going to be seamlessly integrated, and it's
mhm.
going to be a wonderful consumer experience because your flights, your hotels, it's all going to be in one place, and it's easier for companies like Railbookers to bring that all together. So that's one that really excites me. And I guess maybe the leading question there for you on that, Frank, is that given travel advisors are such an important part of your business, ultimately they just want the best experience for their guests, but also a seamless experience for them to be able to book. I know you guys have your platform for travel advisors to be able to log into and be able to get access to promotional materials and digital maps and all the tools they need access to be able to help promote and sell these products. Where do you think technology is going to advance in the rail space? That's one example that obviously I was keen to share, but
Mhm.
obviously you're across your roadmap and you've got probably got many other things lined up. What are some of the other
Yeah.
ways you'll see this technology evolve in the rail space?
Yeah, it's a good question. Right now in the rail space and the kind of the space we're in, because all the different rail lines around the world are all at completely different journeys from a technology platform. So some don't have APIs themselves, things like that. So for us, we've kind of built our own platform. As you talked about, where does that advance? We continue to try to make things as seamless and easy, starting with our own staff first, right? So because they can deliver great service. As far as our travel agent partners, and like you said, we've got the logins on our website, which is really marketing material. Eventually, we'll have things because right now I should say this: there isn't a booking engine on Earth that includes rail, hotel. It doesn't exist. There is no such thing, and the reason why is there's no commonality. So for us, eventually, I think we'll have a version of that. That's not a short-term goal for us, to be honest, with you, because what I've learned is just because you can book something online doesn't mean you know where it goes and how to do it, right? Like,
Exactly.
oh, here you
Yeah.
go. It'd be like if we gave our reservation system to the traveler. Here you go. Well, you still don't know where the train goes. So how does that work? So we still want to be there in a way that's meaningful for them, and we can provide service to them. We want to do it in the easiest, fastest way for them to be efficient as possible. So we're constantly looking at ways. Our new websites that I had mentioned we're going to be developing will have some features of that for our travel agent partners. It won't be a full online booking engine. We want to move in that way to make it easier for them. Right now, we do make it easier for them because we're probably the only people that they can actually call, like to get help on it. But we do want to make it easy on a digital sense because in that way, what you're saying, Dan, I think about that same thing as well. I'm like, hey, everything we do is digitized. We don't deliver a hard item, right? It's all digital. So how do we move things that even if the technology is there, and my attitude is always, I'll never let technology get in the way of satisfying a customer or travel agent's needs. I'll find a way in the meantime. That's kind of what we've done. We'll continue to evolve, but I think the more technology evolves, it's funny because a technology comes out for something different, and we'll think about it differently to say, oh, we could actually apply that here in something completely different, and that is that a better experience. So that's more of our journey where we're trying to go.
The one thing I really like about you mentioned about digital inventory, because that's a way to look at our industry that many consumers don't even make the connection to the fact that when they're purchasing something online or through their travel advisor, there's not a physical exchange of goods. There is the confirmation of the itinerary, but ultimately that's yet to be delivered upon. So you basically have the promise of an incredible trip in your hand that you've now committed to, and it's up to the travel company to deliver on that. And so, but it is very different to your point about a physical good purchasing something on Amazon. And it's one thing that to underscore your point about people making high stakes decisions on their travel that are not only costly, but also such a valuable amount of their time when they're taking a holiday. They want the hand holding. And what we've already seen, and these stats certainly back it up, people are overwhelmingly using AI tools to do their research. But they're still very much, as much, if not more than ever, using traditional modes of booking, including travel advisors. And that's exciting for many of us who've been in the industry for a long time to see travel advisors continue to thrive. And I know that's such a big focus for you and your team to connect those suppliers. But it is interesting to think about where this could go in terms of being able to build out that platform and how far away we are from that. And the fact you even said that's not a short term priority because that's even if you could build that solution, it doesn't mean that people are going to choose to use that to make that booking. And obviously, your commitment in many ways is to the partners and the distribution options that you've created, as opposed to trying to do everything all in one. So this is exactly the point of where you could build it with technology, but would people follow you there? And is that the ideal state of the business? So anyway, so a good discussion on technology, and obviously always interesting to have those conversations with you, Frank. And I'll be keen to learn more once you get back from your next session at MIT. But the other thing I wanted to get into is the product side, because
Mhm.
for me, ultimately, that is why we travel, to be in destination, have these incredible experiences, connect with people, and one of the things that is unique about the train experience is the grand journey, this whole concept of going on a grand tour. I know it's a very popular option for your travelers
Mhm.
for Europe, for example. But tell us a little bit about how that specific type of itinerary has really come back, and what it is that people are looking for in the kind of grand tour experience.
Yeah, so on a grand tour experience, and there's so many different facets to that. A grand tour can be a multi-city, it can be a multi-country, it could be an iconic, journey. It could be to multiple national parks in the U.S. It's really checking off, I think, for a customer and for a travel advisor, it's checking off a number of things and not seeing it all. I don't want to just say that, but seeing some of the big things and maybe some things they weren't expecting. And that's what we see on these type of grand tours, and they could be themed. We have so many different itineraries, but that's what customers are looking for. It's like, wow, you did Italy and Switzerland, and you did the Bernina and Glacier, Express at the same time, or wow, you hit a number of the different national parks in the U.S. the same time, or you did, X amount of key cities, the imperial cities in Europe, you hit all three. So, and I think people are looking to do that, especially, and sometimes, like I said, that's in concert with another trip that they're doing. They could be doing a river cruise or a cruise, and this is in concert with that. Like, hey, because they're looking for experiences, and that's really what it is, and we can provide that in a customized way that suits their needs.
So tell us what that would look like. So I know the multi-country, I was looking at the Europe one
Mhm.
before our conversation today. There's 6 countries. And I think that, especially when people are getting into travel, they want to, particularly with Europe. I still remember doing a Trafalgar trip, and obviously all those brands incredibly
Mhm.
well. And it was called the European Whirl.
Yep,
and
yep.
and if anything, the criticism was you'd only spend like 3 hours in a destination. You'd have a beer in Munich, you'd be back on the bus again, you'd drive 6 more hours, I've seen, but the idea with a grand tour highly appeals to new travelers and also repeat travelers that are looking to try and
Mhm.
touch as many places as possible.
Mhm.
And so, tell us a little bit more about uh, why you think those have kind of come back in a more significant way.
I think, yeah, great question. I think what I see is they've come back in a significant way because the grand tour concept is still defined by the customer and the travel agent themselves. And what I mean by that is what we see on some of those is, let's say something is Venice, Florence, Rome as an example. Well, someone can decide, well, I only want to spend a night in Rome, but I'd like to do 4 or 5 nights in Florence because I wanna do more vineyards, and you know what? I'm gonna take the train, and we're gonna break it off and do a grand we're gonna spend a few nights right in Cinque Terre as well while we're there. So the grand tour is still what someone perceives as a grand tour, and I think it's more about, for them, "Hey, I'm gonna be there anyway, I wanna go there, I wanna make this memorable." This is eh, for our travelers, they're all traveling for some type of a celebration because we ask that question. It could be a retirement, it could be a birthday, it could be what have you, and it kinda coincides, "Hey, this is a celebration, we're gonna make it a grand tour, we're gonna check off a number of things," whatever those things are. So, I think that's why we've seen it come back versus, let me just go in and out, where our products are not getaway products. I'm not in and out because you can do that on your own. These are journeys, these are experiences, and I think that's what we see more. That's why we've seen that kind of that grand tour come back with people looking for that because it's part of the celebration. I don't think you have a grand tour without the celebration part of it. I think that's the big component of it.
Yeah, and the one thing I just add to that, if that's all right, because I think
Please.
when I mentioned the Trafalgar experience, one, obviously I prefer rail travel to coach travel, given, just traffic and some of the things and the narrow passageways. A number of people I hear talking about the fact, like, I cannot believe they get those buses through those streets.
Yeah,
It's just like
right.
people have like a little PTSD at the end of the day after they've got to their destination. They're still reliving the roads that they were on that day. And so there is and you river cruise, you're obviously beholden to the rivers, and the beautiful thing about that, of course, is like there's some ancient history that you can follow along the rivers, but you can't still get to all the main sites that have developed over hundreds of years on one trip. So you can take a slow paced river cruise, that is for some people. You can take a coach trip where you spend a lot of time on the coach, moving around. If you're going through airports continuously, that's not a desirable grand tour unless you have a private jet, I suppose. But so like the idea of a grand tour, to me, that's the reason I wanted to bring this up because I think it's really unique and special to rail. Like a grand tour with rail is the ultimate grand tour because you can get to the heart of Berlin, Amsterdam, Paris, Geneva, and you can also go in one direction. And that's one of the
Mhm.
you don't have to do a loop. Like so you can start in Berlin and you can finish in Rome. And you can do that trip over the course of 2 weeks and continuously seeing new things and that to me, like that's the style of travel I've loved because it can your senses are continuously stimulated. You're getting off the train and experiencing new places. So yeah, I would say, and I'm sure you feel the same way that the train experience is the ultimate way to have a grand tour of a destination.
Yeah, I definitely think so, and because like you said, you can do and see places, by train that you couldn't do by river or cruise or what have you, or it may be more of a challenge by coach, and you can start enjoying yourself. The other thing I think is we have so many different itineraries, but also you can have a lot of fun with it too. Like as an example, we have everything from Route 66 by rail, right? Or we have a Hollywood to Broadway by rail, and you see all different places along the way. We have that in Europe. Like there's you can actually have a lot of fun with the product itself and what you want to do and where you want to see. And it's not just the main cities people want to see. They can get off and spend a couple nights in wherever that train stops in that one location. So it's you can have a lot of fun with it too.
Well, you mentioned a couple there that actually, I'm actually keen to get your take on what are some of the train journeys that, given that many of our listeners would have heard the iconic scenic itineraries,
Mhm.
and maybe they've decided where they want to go by listening to that episode, and then the luxury travelers as well. But when you're someone, it strikes me that you just, you love this industry, you love rail. So whether it's scenic, iconic, luxury, like you want to do it all
Mhm.
by rail. And so, what are some of the standout ones for you that you're for our listeners, like Frank's recommendations for either trips that you would suggest that people absolutely consider taking because you've had an incredible experience on them. I know you've just opened up Asia, for example. Japan is
Mhm.
really taking off for you guys.
Mhm.
I know how excited your team is about that.
Mhm.
So yeah, and also some new destinations because whenever I speak to your team, they're excited about one of the new trips they've just that has come onto the platform. So yeah, what would be your recommendations to our listeners?
So for recommendations, it definitely, I know you mentioned it a little bit, Switzerland, the Glacier and Bernina in Switzerland. There's so many different itineraries in Switzerland, but Swiss is built for rail travel and just absolutely beautiful. Italy as well, or combining the both, but Italy has done a phenomenal job with their high-speed rail network, and what you can do and see is amazing. I think I've mentioned before, but I've done the Canadian cross Canada, was absolutely loved it. So beautiful, so many different topographies and sites along the way. I just thought it was amazing. A favorite of mine is actually the Empire Builder from Chicago to Glacier National Park for a few nights, and then over to Seattle through the Cascade Mountains. It's just so beautiful. You wouldn't you'd be amazed. But there's so many, and then going forward, I've been lucky enough to go to Japan, but I want to go back to take my family and do one of our Japan itineraries by rail with the high speed rail there, which is incredible. It's I want to take my family to see it.
Yeah. Well, the Japan so I've been fortunate enough to be in Japan, and that's one of the ones that, as far as a great rail destination because of the high speed. But the really cool thing, and I know we've kind of almost goes without saying, but is the fact that when you're on a train journey, that the entire experience on the train is part of the journey throughout the day. It's not just a form of transport to get you from one place to the next. It is a key. So therefore, you're always on this journey, on this trip, having these experiences, seeing the scenery changes. So given that the industry has woken up to the potential of rail, and even speaking to your colleagues in the industry, like we did with that first series, there is it's wonderful that Rail Bookers is seeing the success that you are, but it's also great to see that the industry of rail is being lifted up as well. So when I speak to Rail Europe, you can, the investments they're making and the increased interest in rail travel, it is a bigger industry trend. And so if we kind of zoom out and look at it from your vantage point, I'd love to hear from a business perspective where you see some of the big opportunities right now. And I guess that kind of relates to product. That's why I wanted to segue into that because
Mhm.
obviously you can introduce new destinations as you are. But yeah, tell us where you see the biggest opportunity in rail right now.
I think the big it's all of it, and I'll tell you what I mean by that. It is, I don't I look at it like we're in a business. In our business, we have unlimited leads and unlimited inventory. And what business has that? Meaning there, when you start to look at how many people just travel by train and just in general, and we see that from our demand side and then inventory, because there may be 35 trains a day that go between X and X and X and X. So huge opportunity. And I think we're on the broader side as rail is part of the conversation with everything media, PR, other operators, everyone gets into as a way to travel, it's just bigger because from a product perspective, there's 90 countries around the world that have passenger rail. There really isn't anywhere. And what's always interesting to me, I mentioned Sri Lanka, but you see like out of our Australian market, they're interested to go in Korea and different areas and expanding into Asia to travel to, obviously not even just Japan. So there's so many places that you can go that already have passenger rail or have a luxury rail, and there's such a build on luxury rail happening around the world too, that I think for us, I think it's going from strength to strength. I don't see it slowing down. And you're seeing a lot as you started with so much more investment into that area from very large companies that are investing into that area, whether it's luxury or what have you. And the national systems are improving their products and expanding there too. So I just see it just continuing to grow.
In terms of some of the challenges that you come up against, I'm also curious whether, we've talked about technology, but in terms of the customer experience or why people may not choose travel by rail, what are some of the challenges that you see? And obviously the one I liken it to, but it's clearly the inverse of it, is that a lot of people don't want to get on ships because they're concerned about how they're going to feel being on the water and if they're going to get motion sick. And that is a real issue for the cruise industry. I didn't realize until I attended a couple of cruise conferences just how big an issue it is to get first time cruisers, how difficult it is to convert people for their
Mhm.
first cruise to see if that's, especially when someone's committing to being on a ship for a week or more and if they're going to feel nauseous. And so that's a real challenge they have and it's something they have to overcome. Is there anything that's like that with rail that you see and that
Yeah, good,
has
good.
been limiting its growth that you can unlock?
Yeah, good question. I don't think not in the same way on the cruise, and I understand that from the cruise side. I would say some of the things would be one, like I've been saying, just the knowledge of you can do it by rail, versus and that I know I repeat it, but it's so much people like I had no idea you could even do this by
Yeah.
rail. We're gonna get a car.
Yeah.
The second one that does come up is luggage. How does luggage work on the train, right? So because people may not be familiar with it, it's luggage. It's how does it work at the station? Do you have to get there earlier? Your tickets, things like that, which we take care of all that so that and they're all different too. So that lack of knowledge or that little bit of fear, it's probably similar on the cruise side, like, hey, what's it going to be like? So those would probably be two of the things that come up. And then lastly, it's a lot of the logistics, which we take care of. Well, when I get there, how do I get to the hotel? We'll provide, you can book a transfer with us, things like that. So it tends to be the logistics of it, because again, it's customized. So those are some of the things that I don't want to say restrict us, but they're the questions that come in on a regular basis. We can see that from our webinars and trainings, the type of questions people have, and you can tell that they haven't been on a train journey before. So we really try to explain that earlier on. So yeah.
Yeah. No, there's 2 this is yeah, it makes me laugh because there's, like, you always like, this is where it's so fascinating when you, like, listen into customer calls as you do, and you highlighted that, how important that is, because it was certainly part of my role, in the travel space is listening to customers and staying. And we always encourage, as you know, any executives joining, that they should spend a certain amount of their time just listening to customer questions. And people would ask things like, well, and I would assume in this instance, like, do I sleep on the train? Like, is
Right.
that the train journey? Right? It's like, am I limited to sleeping on the train? Is it like an RV, but I'm on a train? And I'm like, am I part of a group? Or even you mentioned the other thing, which is, the transfers. People are genuinely concerned about getting to airports, from airports, or to train stations. Who's going to meet me? Because that's the part that could be stressful and overwhelming. And when you start to realize, wait a second, no, that's like you get on the train during the day, you've had a shower, you're rested, you've had breakfast, you're like, you get on the train and you start your day, and then you stop somewhere for lunch, and you stop somewhere else for dinner, and you stay in a hotel, and then you get, and it's like, oh, and we shuttle you back and forth. It's like, oh, I get that. Now I understand what it is that
Yeah.
you do and why everyone raves about it.
That's
Yeah.
exactly right, but we'll get so many of those questions are like, "Hey, does a train wait for us if we overnight at a hotel to stay there?" Well, it depends what train. Some do, some don't. If it's an extra, what happens if I miss that train? So you get what happens if there's a train delay, which we take care of all that reaccommodating like an airline would do, rail, hotel, sites. So you get a lot of those logistical questions because it's not a set canned packaged product. It can be, there's components to it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Well, let's finish by talking about the future of rail since, the theme of your conference was the renaissance of rail with the AI called out, which I thought was very clever. And, this whole series, and really, I mean, we created that spotlight episode, which was very much about the renaissance of rail. And clearly, a renaissance can last for many years, as we've seen in history. So that, this renaissance is clearly underway. But if you look at, the next 5 years, even taking us to 2030, Frank, here we are having this conversation in 2026. How do you see rail evolving over the next few years?
I see it evolving as more new luxury rail builds are coming out, as national rail systems and scenic rails are improving their products and adding different, whether it's adding different routes, new routes, and even the product in itself, right? So like a different, like a Trenitalia as an example, in their executive class car, they used to have 8 seats and then a conference room. Well, they're getting rid of their conference rooms to have 16 seats. They're opening up more for travel. So you're going to see that, it continues to evolve. But what I would see, and we're working on part of this from a search perspective that we'll have, is that you can be able to put in your personal preferences and get a selection of itineraries or suggestions based on what's personal to you with rail travel all over the world based on your suggestions. And that could be a combination of luxury and national rail systems. Like as an example, even with the Venice Simplify and Express, well, that you mentioned it, that Paris to Venice, well, that's only one night. No one flies all the way over to Europe for one night. What else are you doing? And we see that today, but I think you'll start to see that it will start to not normalize, but it's easier to find and research with some of the tools that we're creating. Because right now it's looked up as like individual components, right? And I think we'll lead that. And I think, but more, and as it gets written about more and more and more, people, like you said, whether it's that country club or things like that, like, hey, let's try that. I mean, the amount of people I bump into once they'll ask me what I do, and they're like, oh, like, where can you do that, Barrel? Oh, I wanna do that. That sounds cool. That sounds fun. Because
Yeah, yeah.
it's a journey, it's an experience, and I think it doesn't really have a downside to it. So that word of mouth is a big one too, as more and more people travel on by
Yeah, for
train.
sure. Well, and interesting that the example. I mean, when you have high net worth, like you're talking about the luxury side specifically, and how you target and message to them, because obviously that one individual at the ski club, this private ski club, he had latched on to the idea and then got everyone else on board with it, and now everyone's raving about it and they're trying to figure out their next trip. So now you've gone from one to eight, and obviously you know how this math works in travel marketing, and that's the power of referrals, and so for sure, getting in front of those organizations to be able to highlight this opportunity. That's where I'm so excited for you and the team, because you have a great business with a terrific product and just a wonderful group of people to work with. And so when you see the stars aligning like that, I mean, obviously, I want nothing more for you and the team than just continued success of rail. And then so when we bring it home to rail bookers, what does the future of rail bookers look like in the next few years? What are some of the other destinations you're planning to
Mhm.
introduce? What are some, and obviously you're building out the team. I see no shortage of people that want to work for Railbookers. I saw a lot of colleagues that I worked with for many years that I was delighted. Monica, Chris David, and a number of others. They love working at Railbookers, and you're continuing to hire great people. And I'm like, you seem to be getting like an all-star group together. So like it's so I wanted to highlight those well because as people listening to this, if they may be travel advisors looking to sell rail experiences. It could be customers looking to book over the course of these 3 episodes. But we actually do see a lot of amazing people that listen to this podcast then decide, this is the next career for them. And they want to work with you in the team. So yeah, tell us a little bit about the future, Frank.
Yeah, so first of all, we love having those all-stars with us. So we're very thankful that they're part of Railbookers Group. We have a philosophy. We want anyone who looks at our stuff, we want them to either say, "Hey, why don't we just buy and go with them?" Or, "Hey, why don't I just sell their product?" Or, "Hey, why don't I just work for them?" So we always and last year, I got to highlight, we had 115,000 applications to work for us. So we're very thankful for that one. Um, for us, the future, we want to really double down on product business development team that supports our travel agent partners. One, expand our product around the world because there's so many products around the world that are different for different markets and how they travel in different routings. As we're seeing and learning in the Asian market, our new Asian customers and how they travel to different areas, things like that. Um, but sky's the limit. But that's what we see is really doubling down on our product marketing in business development, as well as our technology, our AI built technology, our own. We've got a great software engineering team that loves innovating in a space that hasn't had a lot of innovation per se. You got a lot of legacy systems, but how can we? So that's kind of our goal and our focus going forward because we're very lucky to continue to see strong growth and seeing that. But it's like I said, it's limitless. Unlimited inventory, unlimited leads, and then how can we keep expanding that? And the one last thing I'd say is the most interesting to me is different markets we open up, meaning customers from that market traveling all over the world. Although they have sometimes different needs or they'll take different routings, their knowledge of rail or lack of it and their excitement on rail is exactly the same. It's exactly the same, which is very interesting to me because they're like, "Well, this seems cool. Oh yeah, I had no idea, right?" So
Yeah.
it just tells me, in one sense, sometimes it's a struggle because you're the only one waving the flag, but in the other sense, you are the only one, and you're seeing it, all of a sudden grow right away. It's not, different. Let's say maybe different industries where you're competing against 7 or 10 other cruise lines. You're competing with all these. There really isn't, and people are genuinely excited about this type of travel when they hear about it. So that excites me.
Yeah, that's terrific, Frank. No, and I mean the future is very bright for the rail space. Obviously, it's extremely bright for rail bookers and the team. And I just in the last year and a half, just seeing the trajectory that you're on. I'm sure our listeners obviously would be keen to follow. I know we have a spotlight episode later this year after your next conference in Vancouver, which is really exciting. And obviously, I'm thrilled to be back and to be involved in the event. And so it's our listeners are going to be able to follow you on this journey. But just before we close off, given that you are so enthusiastic and also just incredibly motivated, I know you're bullish on the sector for all the right reasons that we've talked about. You're continually pushing yourself. Not just the team, but you're very intellectually curious, and also I'm just going to say this too, like you're just a wonderful person. Like people gravitate towards you, and it's one of the things in the travel industry that your reputation is everything. And so when people know about your work ethic and even your morals as it applies to work and partnerships, and so going back to where you reference, would we be comfortable having this conversation with our customer at the table? If that's your litmus test, that is a great example to be able to highlight of transparency. And so but all of this, obviously, you are continually reading, learning, developing, growing yourself. And that's the part for the executives out there listening to this, because your roles are also incredibly stressful, exhausting. These are the things that people don't see. You travel extensively, you have a family, you've got so this is so what ultimately keeps you motivated, and what are some of the things that sources you reach out to, or some of the things that you gravitate towards to keep perspective and to be able to lead a great company like this?
Oh, thanks, Dan. Yeah, great question. I mean, one thing is, I would say I don't take myself that seriously. At the end of the day, I don't believe my own BS. No, I'm kidding. Is that because I always want to be learning, and I always want to position myself in the company as the underdog. Because it just makes us work harder, meaning learn as much. The second thing is, we try to ask twice as many questions, so we are learning. And where can I learn at all times from a customer, from this, a trend outside of our industry? Learn just as much outside the industry as in our industry. And what keeps me going is, making what seems impossible possible. I always, for the amount of times, earlier on that I heard, you can't do that. I'm like, okay, hold my beer. No, I'm kidding. Yeah. So because I think there is so much possible because the customer wants to make that possible, and when you're, I know this will seem weird. I never really pay attention to what someone spends because they're all on holiday, and I just want them to have an amazing time, regardless, because they could have saved up 30 years their whole life. They remind me of my dad who immigrated to the U.S. when he was 12 of my grandparents is a bricklayer. And at the end of the day, it may save his whole life to go on this trip. I just want to deliver it. I don't care how much you're spending or how long you're going for. That gets me motivated. We have so many customers that send in the pictures of their trips from going all over the world. And in all my town halls, we share all our customer pictures that they send it on their own to our team. And that really motivates not just me, but our whole team that there's people behind this. And this is their anniversary, their holiday, their vacation. This is the graduation. It's just it's meaningful work. So I love it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for leading by example. And I just want to close off by just sharing one of the things that I certainly saw stood out to me at the conference, which was the fact you were so focused on entertaining everyone. So yes, obviously you dressed up and like and it was funny and it was, and then but by bringing in David Stryker and having someone that could just really entertain the audience, they had spent a couple days talking about the business and preparing for this next year and having kind of a proper sales conference. But ultimately, one of the things I learned from the book called The Art of Innovation by Tom Kelly, which is a bit of a dated read now, the firm IDEO, but some of the principles absolutely still apply. And the one that I had learned back maybe about 15 years ago when I first read it was the fact that hot teams celebrate together. And this whole idea that when you have teams that run hot, you have to give them the opportunity to let off steam and you have to give them the opportunity to celebrate a win. So for me, I was always very focused on when we launched a major project or we got to a certain point, we had to find a way to celebrate because then you're in scaling the mountain again. You can't just ask a team to then just start over without actually taking a moment to recognize, celebrate, and I saw that um, displayed so well at the conference. And I guess that's one thing I just wanted to finish off on is that you definitely live that by example, and it's yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing it again in person. So.
No, thanks. I'm so thankful you're gonna be there, and thanks for the comments too. It's yeah, we definitely celebrate. We got great people in there, and just wonderful. Yeah, it's like a family. It's seeing your family again once a year. We have a good time. 'Cause we work hard, but we play hard too, and we don't take ourselves that seriously, which is good. So
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Frank. Thank you for joining us for this and helping to bring this whole series together. I was so delighted to be able to do a three-part rail series in 2026, given all the interest from our listeners, and to really be able to focus it around rail bookers and doing two episodes on the product, and then being able to have this episode together with you. So, thank you again for our collaboration and friendship, and I look forward to seeing you in the real life again shortly.
same here, my friend. Look forward to it. Thanks, pal.
And that's a wrap on our three-part series with Railbookers. I hope you enjoyed this final conversation with Frank Marini, the CEO of Railbookers. I definitely encourage you to make sure you've listened to all three episodes. We started focused on the iconic and scenic journeys with Jim Marini and Matt Foy from Railbookers. And then last week we were joined by Tyler Wallinger and Gareth Jones from Railbookers to discuss the new golden age and luxury rail travel. I am a huge fan of rail, and I was so looking forward to bringing this series together. We do have clips and highlights to share with you on our social channels, which you can find on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Instagram. And you can find all three episodes at traveltrendspodcast.com facebook.com/railbookers. And I'd love to get more feedback from you on where we should go next with a future rail series. We are going to be doing a spotlight episode from the Railbookers annual conference from Vancouver later this year. So if you want me to ask any specific questions of the team or their partners, be sure to send me a message, dan@traveltrendspodcast.com. And as you heard throughout the series, if you want more information, definitely check out railbookers.com so you can plan your next trip for yourself or for one of your clients. Thanks so much for joining us on this series. I hope you enjoyed them as much as I did. And until next week, safe travels.